Hello, MBA hopefuls. We're live on the air on MBA Waves. We're grateful that you're with us. Happy that you're joining us. And we're here to talk about all things business and education. We've got a great program today with two amazing, wonderful guests. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And this will help us to continue to create all the great content, the free content, so that you can learn about your journey into the business school arena. So today, like I said, we've got two awesome guests, and we're going to be talking about how to be on video and how the video essays are going to be better as a result of this particular episode. So we're going to learn about the different types of MBA video essays. We're going to learn how to prepare and how to deliver the best video essays, and also how to use the video essays to your advantage. So let me introduce our guests. First of all, I'm here with my awesome co-hosts, Eric and Krithika. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Nice to see you. And we're here with Maria of Applicant Lab and Justin of Dialog Video Marketing. So we have a really nice, cohesive group of people, experts in dealing with the applications and also expert in dealing with who you are when you're actually on the video screen. So it's a nice, compact ecosystem that we've got here. And I'm going to dive right in. So how do video essays factor in to the whole video application process? Maria, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, sure. So I think, first of all, it's important to note that there are actually two different types of video essays. There's the pre-prepared one, in which you, as I just implied, in which you prepare the video in advance, and then you submit it as part of the application. But then there's the more spontaneous video essay, and these are becoming far and far more popular, especially in an age of ChatGPT, where more and more folks are running their essays through that ChatGPT, machine, and admissions officers want to be sure that what they're getting from the candidate is authentic. And what better way to test for authenticity than to have a spontaneous video question component? And this is a situation where a school will ask anywhere from 1 to sometimes 5 questions. You don't know which question exactly you're going to get in advance usually, and then you're given, let's say, and it will vary, right? But it'll be something like 10 seconds to think and 60 seconds to respond, or something along those lines. So when we're talking about the video essays, those are the two big buckets. And normally these are done as part of the application. So when you submit your essays, your resumes, your recommendation, these are also included in that package that gets submitted.
Great. Thank you for that breakdown.
Yeah, I have to say that I'm a big fan of the think on your feet kind of essays, especially now, because it forces the applicant to stay on top of things and probably start the essays on their own without taking any other help, or, let's not go there. So I really love these spontaneous essays.
Yeah, me too.
I will say it's also, like, if we want to just get more contemporary about it, it's really interesting to chart what's actually happening in the US political system and how they're looking at the debates coming up, right? Versus the canned speeches and the thump speeches that they're giving. So it's not just thinking on your feet for business school. Like, this is something that happens in other fields as well. And it's actually a big deal here in the United States right now in the whole Trump-Harris debate that's coming up. Why don't we talk about some of the technical aspects that applicants should focus on? Justin, you want to jump in here and talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, there's video is tough. Video is so tough. People, you don't know what you don't know. And then when you become aware, you're like, crap, now am I doing it wrong? And then there's so many different variations that, my agency focuses on content creation for LinkedIn. And I cannot tell you how many crappy videos come across my feed because there's so many things to know. I tell people it takes 5 to 10 times more work doing a video version of something than the actual thing. And the reason for that is because there's so many factors. I was just in a call right before this, and I was coaching the client on, move the camera here, turn that light on, turn that light off. And if you expect somebody to kind of know all the things about video to hit it out of the park in the first time, it's just not going to happen. So my best advice is to keep it simple. And here's kind of a couple tips to keep it simple, because there's so many things to overwhelm you. Just keep it simple. Number one, be in a quiet environment. a lot of people don't realize they're not in a quiet environment, whether it's an office space and there's background noise and phones ringing and people walking by, or, we quiet and distraction-free environment. So you don't want your phone on vibrate unless you're using your phone. But if you are using your phone to record, make sure it's in do not disturb mode so you don't get a call halfway through. So quiet environment, face a window. Don't stand in front of the window. Don't be in front of the window. That causes what's called backlight, or not backlighting, but it's a type of backlighting where you kind of look like a dark blob, like Darth Vader, about to do a presentation. So use the natural light to help you. Don't put the phone, or your camera here, you here, and the light over here. Put the phone between you and the light that is the window. And usually natural light, like from a window, is going to be fantastic for any kind of video. So keep it simple. Face a window, record your video, make sure there's nothing distracting in the background. Make sure you're looking at the shelves in your background. Is there anything on here that would be compromising, any book titles, anything like that? Do your due diligence, but don't worry about it too much. There's more into it we can talk about, but I do like that it's about the lighting and the background primarily, but and that's those two big things I want people to remember.
Probably about sound too.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like this is like one of the very meta conversations, because what we do to produce this show, MBA Waves, is very much what you probably want to think about. So as I was reminding all of us just before we went live, like think about like having good lighting on you. You don't want to have backlighting. I had to shut these blinds behind me because it was like a super intense sunset coming in, and I was just a silhouette. And I think everything is a little bit more exaggerated on camera. And another thing to think about is the camera angle. Like if you're going on a laptop, like most people, is probably pointing up, and it looks something like this, which is not very attractive. So I just prop it up in a couple of boxes. You can't see that, and here we are, and it looks like I'm looking right at you.
Yeah,
the only
exactly.
We don't see the nostrils. No nostrils and nostril hair.
Yeah, that's a problem. Or the opposite. And mine's not optimized right now. It's looking almost straight down at me. It's not optimized at all. It's just for the practical sake of I don't want to have to figure out a system, But if you are using a laptop, that's the nice thing, is you can get it right at eye level. It's harder on me with the desktop and the camera on top, but yeah, that's nice. Use boxes. Don't worry about, looking fancy. You want it at eye level, looking straight at you. That's the ideal.
Totally. So I'll ask both of you, Maria and Justin, how can applicants deliver their message confidently and effectively on camera? Whoever wants to take that first.
Sure. I think the first thing to do is simply to practice, and not specifically necessarily practice exactly the question you think you will get, but simply practice the act of setting up your laptop, as Justin described, talking into the little camera hole, right? I think intuitively as human beings, we want to make eye contact when we're talking. And so we have a tendency to look down at ourselves. And right now I'm making eye contact with myself in the mirror, but to anyone watching my video, I'm looking downwards and not at them. So just practice to get comfortable with the idea of speaking into a camera instead of into someone else's eyes. And just practice the act of, if you're going to get a 30 seconds to think and a 90 seconds to respond type of question, don't over practice. Don't try to memorize answers to every possible question you can get. We can talk a little bit more about that later, but do at least develop a certain level of comfort. Even just make up, very low stakes questions like, what did you have for dinner last week? What's your favorite color? What's your favorite book? And just get into the habit of speaking into the camera, because the more you do it, then when you need to devote those cognitive resources to actually answering the question you've been asked, you won't be taking up brain space with, okay, wait, am I looking in the right place? And how is my lighting and all those other topics?
Yeah, there's a lot of cognitive load. That's a really good point. A lot of cognitive load when you're doing video. It's like a conversation. It's like being interviewed in person, but times 50, the amount of stressors we think about. And I like that tip. That's a really good one. Just getting your reps in and practicing. We help our clients with video, right? We do use an interview process with our clients, but there are clients which takes all the stress out of it. I don't know, I'm not an applicant. Yeah, this isn't my space per se. But one of the tips, so I don't know if it's possible, but if you could have, practice maybe with another person there, that may not be reasonable for this type of use case. But one thing I have told folks is if you are doing video on your own without another person there, put a little picture of your dog or your grandpa or something right next to the camera, and that helps you and pretend you're in a sense talking to that person. Now this is off camera. This would be for prepared videos. This would not be for live videos, right? Because you're talking to an actual human being. But that's one tip I give them is try to talk to an actual human, or you know, even a dog's not a human, but someone you're comfortable talking to, kind of takes a little bit of that stress out of it and puts you in a better brain space.
But even if it is a laptop based video, you can still sort of paste it right behind your camera.
Yeah.
That's actually a tip that I do give people, even for these more spontaneous ones. Like use a little tape or something and tape either, you know, I actually have someone's eyes like from here on up to try to really force that eye contact thing. Ooh. Speaking of being prepared, I'm in a WeWork cubicle and the light just went out. So I need to wave my arms around I'm going to turn off my camera to wave my arms around to return on the light.
But Maria, this is a great situation to have happen during this episode, where we had to deal with like little crises, right? Troubleshooting, like thinking about what could happen, like, right? Oh, my roommate could come home, or the ambulance could be going by. Like, I know that I live near a hospital, so I shut all the windows. Even if it's a nice day, I'll shut all the windows in advance, knowing that at any moment there could be an ambulance really taking up a lot of brain space.
Or even pets, especially cats, have a tendency to want to walk right in.
Well, speaking of the picture of the dog, I think that's hilarious, and like I think it's also calming, especially someone like Barra, who's such an animal lover. But as long as you don't, you know, ask any questions like, "You want to go for a walk to the school?"
You don't get them mixed up. Yes, that's important.
But my life has always been take a little Post-it, right, and just stick a little arrow right next to the camera, just as a constant reminder to keep that eye contact there as much as you can. You know, you can look at your notes, you can look around, not be artificial, but like prioritizing that camera lens, because as Maria said, the perspective of the audience or the person you're speaking to is going to be you're not looking at them. And I think it's very much plays into connection. It makes your message come across better and better received.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting question, because, you know, making camera contact is something I do by default now. Even on calls, I often find myself doing it, and then and I'm trying to think, where did I learn that? And I think it'll, Maria, to your point, it just came from being a video guy and doing video for so long. I've learned, my brain now knows the camera is the eyes, the camera is the eyes, the camera is the eyes, and I like looking people in the eyes when I'm talking to them. So that's just it's just a learned behavior.
Yeah, and I have to tell two things here. So people typically tend to look down or elsewhere, or to look at themselves when they're very self-conscious. So that is again, alluding to the practice that Maria and Justin, you had referred to. And one more thing that I assume is that people also feel the pressure of delivering it right because they have only one attempt at it. And I love what Maria did right now. So the light went out. It's okay. Even if it's a pre-recorded video and you have only one chance, it's okay. It's also about how you handle the situation without losing your cool, because you could be in a class and things may not go your way. And then how do you respond to such a situation is also a way. And I always remember this from one of our AIGAC conferences where, I think one of our friends told about how a cat jumped onto an applicant's lap during the video essay. And the person calmly patted the cat and then kept talking about something, something like a failure or something else. So keeping that calm under pressure is so important.
I'm also thinking about how, I don't know if you've ever seen any newscasters. A lot of times you'll see broadcasts of newscasters, but they're actually just solo, and they just have all of their gear there, and they'll just set it up, and then but it seems like they've got a whole crew with them, but they're looking at the camera and it's just them. It's not even that they have someone behind a camera in the studio that they can actually have eye contact with. So I often think about that when I watch news, that it's not always as it appears. I find it really challenging. I wonder if they're going to create, if computers are going to change it all with that aspect, because so much of video broadcasting has become so normalized. I mean, I think about the Jetsons when I was growing up, and I used to watch the Jetsons. You didn't even think about that, right? They would just turn on their videos and they're video conferencing with each other. So it's a pretty interesting, unnatural thing to look at the thing when there's people's faces right below it. You're not looking at making that eye contact, which you're really not making anyway. It's super interesting. We sort of touched a little bit on this, but can we go into the weeds a little bit more about the major do's and don'ts that applicants should think about when it comes to actually preparing content for the MBA video essay?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'll jump in on that one. So I think what I advise my clients to do is to come up with what I call Swiss Army knife stories, because the whole point of the video essay is that it's supposed to be spontaneous and a surprise, and so it's supposed to get a sense of how do you think on your feet, and so the idea, they are hoping on their end that you have not in fact guessed exactly which question you're going to get, because otherwise that defeats the purpose of the whole spontaneity aspect of it. Otherwise, why even bother with the platform? So, but we don't know exactly what question we're going to get, but we can guess based on research, or sometimes the admissions committees will tell us, okay, we're going to ask you a question about leadership, or we're going to ask you a question about a time that a question about a time you were on a team, or we're going to ask you a question about your motivations for getting the MBA. And so since there's no possible way for us to ever imagine all 200 questions that might be in the question bank, because on the back end, what happens, by the way, is that at least for some of these spontaneous questions, there is a bank of questions that the admissions officers will come up with, and then the program will randomly select one and flash it on the screen for you. So instead of trying to memorize every possible permutation of every possible question you might get, what I advise is coming up with stories that you have that have multiple facets to them. So maybe you were part of a project that involved a teamwork component, a leadership component, and a conflict component. I call those Swiss Army knife stories. So you pull it out, and then depending on whatever question flashes on the screen, you know, like, okay, I've got the core story here. I'm going to pull out the little part that focused on the ethical dilemma part of the story, or I'm going to pull out the little part that focused on how I overcame the conflict in the group part of the story. So that way you can be pretty well prepared to answer no matter what question gets thrown at you. That's my number one content preparation tip.
Absolutely.
Eric and Kritika, do you guys have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, the first thing, it's about knowing yourself, right? And once especially after having written your essays, you've gone through a lot of self-reflection already. So these tools are sort of at your disposal. And I'd say, like, go into your toolbox before the video essay moment and polish your tools, get everything kind of ready. It's like, oh, I want to say it like that. Because I think key here is remembering that you do have a limited time. You can't just ramble on. So getting the story concise. And this is absolutely something you can practice. Again, to Maria's point, not practicing to the point that it becomes robotic and canned, but you can record yourself. Maybe you don't realize, like, while you're speaking, either because you're nervous or because you're just kind of lost in thought, you tap your foot a lot, or you play with your hair. I've seen a couple of times with people. So these are things that you can catch yourself doing and sort of weed out and polish your presentation for the real thing.
I heard add that some of the people around here think that it's more like improv. It's not. It's just like someone's going to ask you from, even though it's like a huge question bank or whatever, it's typically around topics that are pertaining to your MBA application and around it. So you don't have to feel that you have to be the next Seinfeld or something like that. And you just have to make sure that, as Eric and Maria already talked about, knowing those stories that would help you stand out, and also rightly using the words. Because I often have people worrying about, can I use this word? Will it be, or can I use a sentence? Or like people thinking that they have to rehearse it before with scripts. And, I think that's where, like, you don't have to do it. It's more about understanding that, hey, if someone stops you on the road and asks you, like, okay, what happened in the incident? It's about which kind of framework would you use, or which kind of like storytelling approach would you use to state such story. So having those frameworks in hand also helps you to stand out in the video essays.
Justin, you might have some ideas about how to keep things fresh.
Yeah, well, as you guys are talking, I'm thinking, so this is really an interesting use case for video, where you've got prepared videos, and prepared videos is so different because, like Eric was saying, you can prepare for that. You can almost have like a script type of thing going on if you really want to. You can have more control, and when you lose control in these impromptu videos, there's more panic in the brain. And really what this whole thing, if you really think about it, if you take a big step back, and Bear, this is your space, you and I've talked about this, you're really trying to get your brain into a place that is in a this is okay, this is normal, I'm okay, this is fine. Like, man, what that basically means is you're able to engage your prefrontal cortex and do thinking. When you go into fight or flight mode, your prefrontal cortex just goes nope, and you're in fight or flight. So really, what we're talking about is techniques to normalize, to teach our brain, or trick our brain, even hacks, if you will, into making it a safe place, and making video a safe place. Because it's not. I think a lot of people, when it comes to, they saw this study, this stat, more people would rather be dead than give a public speech. And this is a type of form of that. Video definitely brings out that public speaking fear in us. And so in terms of practical advice, it's really try to figure out, from my perspective, everyone's different. My wife, she's getting her MBA right now. And she has to do these video essays, and they're impromptu and stuff. And everyone's different. But she's experienced on stage, so for her it's easier. And somebody like my daughter, who is very, very stressed, has stage fright. Ironically, she's also going in a play, right? So she's actively working on that. Everyone's got their techniques and their things that are going to help more or less. And it's really about using this as a resource, maybe just one idea to implement. And ultimately, the goal is to get comfortable, a little more comfortable on camera. But I don't have any specific tips other than the one I shared earlier with the put your grandma's face next to the camera.
Well, you know what I would say that I think a lot of people forget to do, and we talked about this a few times already on previous episodes of MBA Waves, talking about test anxiety and like GMAT prep and so forth, is breathing. Like, so many times when people get nervous or something intimidates them, they hold their breath, and then that kind of sets off the parasympathetic immune system, and
spiral.
And you spiral, right? And just like, hang on, don't forget to breathe. And if you're gonna, maybe, I would say add another Post-it. Realizes breathing, and don't forget to do that. Like, take a deep breath and exhale. Like, let that go, let that energy go, and it'll flow, I think, a lot better. But coming back to the do's and don'ts that Barra had asked, there's probably a little bit more for Maria, but Justin, feel free to chime in as well. A couple, I'm gonna maybe rapid fire here. What do you think about having something to drink with you, like coffee or soda or versus water? Anything goes?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, of course. I'm sitting here drinking in my little WeWork phone booth. I think it's really important, especially because if you are going to get nervous, it's better to have that water and just take a quick sip of it. I tell my son all the time, whether it's his shoes for soccer or his notebook, I'm like, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So have the water next to you, and if you don't drink it and you don't touch it, great. But if you do find yourself needing it, whew, what a relief it's going to be to just have it right there. I think that's perfectly fine. And I think
you don't have burping.
That's true. Not carbonated or something that might cause stomach upset.
Yeah.
But I think sort of to Justin's point about sort of mind things you can do is, if you picture that the person on the other side of the screen is some sort of judge on high, that you are going to be, that you are being judged and everything you say and everything you do is being criticized and picked apart, then of course you're going to freak yourself out. A lot of times when these video essays are posed, they are often posed with language such as "introduce yourself to your classmates." Mm-hmm. And so I would urge you to picture on the other side of this a friend of yours, or maybe someone that you've recently met at a networking event, right? So you're going to keep it professional. You're not going to be completely casual, like, "Hey, what's up? I kicked a lot of butt on that project," right? You're going to keep it professional, but you're still going to keep it friendly, because one of the main things that they're looking for here is they're not looking for perfect rhetoric. This is not a public speaking master's. This is a master's of business. And so they want to get a sense of your personality and your ability to form cogent sentences on the spot, but they're not going to be sitting there saying like, "Oh, they chose they should have said perspicacity and instead they said observation." Like, that's not the point of this. And so hopefully, if instead you picture, maybe it is your grandmother, to Justin, or a puppy that you love, or someone, just imagining that the person on the other side is friendly and they're on your team and they are excited to get to know you. Maybe that could also help with those nerves, instead of the I'm on trial here, which I think sometimes people erroneously think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that last part. It's a little, you said it, I don't know if anyone noticed, that they're for me, they're on my side. That's a critical one to remember. You're not here to convince anyone. You're just here to talk about what you know.
What do you think about making notes, having like a paper and pad aside with you?
Yeah, totally fine. I use it all the time. I mean, I'm not an applicant for any MBA program, but I talk with, these millions dollar company founders all the time, and I take notes profusely. I have my pen and paper ready to go. I think it's a very reasonable human thing to do, and that's my perspective. But Maria, you're in the space. You tell us.
I completely agree, with the emphasis being that it has to be notes and not a script. Because if you do, I think sometimes people in their understandable zeal to over prepare, they might actually have like full on sentences printed out. And the problem is that even if you tell yourself you're not going to use it in the moment, you might get so nervous that you might rest upon it as a crutch. And that's terrible, because it's actually better to have a slightly less organized, slightly more rambly, but authentic answer than a perfectly sanitized answer that is very clearly being read from a piece of paper, right? So you know yourself best. If you know that you can trust yourself to only rely on those notes in case of emergency, so maybe you jot down a few key points you might want to make. So let's say you talk about the whatever project. And so you make a note to yourself, like, okay, point out that I helped Ashley with whatever, did this, blah, blah, blah. So maybe a few bullet points, but not the whole thing. Because if it's too much, you're either going to rely on it too much. It's going to be obvious that you're reading, which is actually worse. It's worse to have a quote unquote perfect answer that is clearly not off the cuff, because from the admissions committee's perspective, you're clearly missing the point of why we're doing this in the first place. So notes, but if you know yourself and you know you're going to look at those notes and it's going to be obvious, then you're better off without them.
Yeah. And I have to say that there's the digital version of the notes. So people always like look down or something. They think like, oh, if I get this question, I can probably look into that. Or so no, don't give into that temptation at all, because again, as Maria said, it's not going to help, and they will know that you're not looking at the camera. And that's going to be like a challenge again. So I would say that I wanted to bring like one of the examples from somebody. They had made painstakingly, literally 3 or 4 versions of the questions that they found online, thinking that they could use one of it whenever a certain question appeared. And they forgot the starting word of the script. So then they kind of like froze when the question came up, like because they had like kind of rehearsed in scripts and all that, and they kind of froze when the question came up. So you don't want to do that. Like even people who give speeches, don't do it. And there's one more thing. Like there was a client who used a teleprompter, a kind of a service, because you could have like all those kind of tools as well. So you could have like a teleprompter. No, you don't want to use all this. This is not the place for it. And you might want to really again, practice just speaking and having a normal conversation with somebody.
Well, that's over preparation, and it just looks so robotic. It's, I think, again, very much about connection, and that's what also part of what leadership is connecting with your team and inspiring them, and that's how you gain their trust, and that's how you can lead them. And if you can't even make these kind of basic connections, I don't know, I think it's just the wrong way to go about it.
Really good point. If you're this to be a leader, what are you showing? What are the decisions, what are the actions you're taking to demonstrate you can be a leader? Leaders are not perfect. They know that. Good leaders know their own inabilities, and they're real about it. So I like that. I love that point, Eric.
I would say
something earlier. I just want to make clear for the audience, because she said like when the question flashes upon the screen, and just so the audience understands that it's generally not like, oh, it flashes on for 1 second, you must retain that information and then respond. No, it's generally on the screen. Like I think it's on the right side of the screen, the entire minute or 2 minutes that you have to answer the question. So if you forget for a second what exactly was asked, it's right there in front of you. Don't panic, don't worry. And you'll see in the practice questions that most of the schools seem to be using a very similar, if not identical format, where there are, I think, unlimited, correct me if I'm wrong, Maria, unlimited practice questions. But then when it's, when you decide, okay, I'm ready, you can't redo it. This is the one shot you get for that particular question. And if I may, I wanted to also ask, again, it's probably a little bit more of a Maria question, because I know sometimes there are options for schools to have not just a spoken response. There's also written questions. So it'll come up like on the same platform, right? And then you have a little bit more time. You want to explain a little bit how that works, Maria? Any suggestions specific to the written?
Yeah, sure. So I think again, if we take a step back and think about, well, why are admissions offices or committees even asking for this? There is a real hunger for authenticity and getting a sense of what you are like in an unprepared moment. You know, and Justin said it perfect. Like, as leaders, first of all, you're not going to be perfect, but also as leaders, you're not going to walk into every meeting with a teleprompter, right? Like, you're not going to be able to say, oh, shoot, I need to quickly send an email to the lawyers to get the lawyers on board with this merger that's happening. Let me spend 45 minutes drafting. Like, you're going to have to be able to communicate things on the fly. And so for the writing assessments, in my experience, from what I've heard, it's not something that requires massive preparation. So don't think like, oh, I need to memorize the GDP of Ghana and be ready to talk about grain imports. It's not going to be anything like that. It will usually be perhaps something where you have to analyze an argument. That's one that's a very common one. And it won't be anything controversial. So for example, it might be something like, businesses have a responsibility beyond just what government says for the well-being of society. Agree or disagree, something like that. So you'll just have to write it out. And I think here, any sort of advice that you would follow for any sort of timed writing assessment, right? If you're taking it for the GRE or maybe the TOEFL or some other type of test, I would say, and this actually does apply to the video questions as well. If you are asked an opinion question, like agree or disagree, or yes or no, or which side of an argument do you fall on, or even something like what's your favorite childhood memory? Don't spend too much time thinking about what's the best answer here. Like, is my favorite childhood memory the time I went to Bogota, or is it the time I did this, or is it because then you're going to use up all your time thinking of the best answer. Just pick a plausible answer that is defensible, and then spend the rest of your preparation time thinking about, okay, what are like the 3 points I'm going to make, for whatever it is to support my argument. And the same thing with the written thing. Don't if you get 15 minutes to prepare or half an hour to write, to do a written essay on the spot, don't spend 15 minutes of your 30 minutes thinking like, well, where do I stand on this issue? On the other hand, no, because then your time's going to run out and then you're going to have a very sloppy, hastily thrown together essay. So the same also applies to one of these questions about, anything where it's like, okay, what's your favorite memory from your professional career? It's okay. They're never going to know if it actually wasn't your favorite memory. So just pick a plausible answer and run with it.
I love that advice. Thanks, Maria.
Well, it really talks about being a bit comfortable in the discomfort, right? And we've talked a little bit about breathing, and we've talked a little bit, Justin, you talked about your wife and her MBA and applying, and your daughter in the play. And, the work that I do has a lot to empower students to feel more comfortable. So I'm curious, what other ways can you help folks that are going into this feel less nervous? Like you talked about, think about it being an informal conversation to your peers, not the almighty judge, right? Are there other things that you feel would be useful? I'm thinking myself, like, record yourself to do this a few times and see how you appear so that you can audit yourself in the process, either through Loom or through Zoom, they rhyme, or through other modes of ways of seeing how are you actually presenting yourself. Now, obviously the weird thing is that we don't like to watch ourselves all the time, right? And so we're going to pick up on things. We don't know the tics that we have or how we show up, but what are some other ways that you can help them from a technical side, but also from the mental, emotional side, so that they're less nervous?
So our process, and I'm just being candid here, our process as an agency, our specialty is marketing, right? It's not for any kind of master's degrees. It's for the purpose of capturing stories for the public. And our process is really revolves around a conversation, and that takes 80% of the stress out of it. But every so often, we do have clients that send us their video content, and I'm always amazed at, like, there are clients who do it so naturally, and there's clients that don't. And I think, in terms of practical steps from getting people to be more comfortable, less comfortable, one of those tips I can think of is, like, is just putting in your reps. Like, honestly, that's like 80% of it. You just got to do it. Like, there's no magic bullet here. We talked about that early on, and I just want to drive that home. Like, you just got to do it. You just got to do it with yourself. And yeah, to your point, you'll be able to see your ticks. We have some clients that get on video and they're talking like this the whole time and say, okay, put your hands down, right? But you'll be able to see that. You'll be able to see that when you do it and you replay it back. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but guess what? Being a leader is going to be uncomfortable. You got to do the hard things, and you got to do them a lot. I'm a leader. I lead my company, and I would actually say, as a quick aside to this point, I was thinking about this, like, one of the benefits of getting good with this is you're going to get your reps in, so that when you lead your team remotely, when and if that time comes, you're more prepared. Or heck, even if you have to do marketing for yourself, like you're working with an agency of ours, you're going to be better prepared. I can't tell you how many professionals you would think have this down, just don't, because they haven't put in their reps. They haven't had to do this. This is an excellent life skill to learn if you choose to embrace it and do it repeatedly.
And I think, to Justin's, that's a great point, because we're not going backwards in terms of all of a sudden Zoom is no longer, these video conferences, these are no longer going to be part of how work gets done. So in the future, this talking into a camera and dealing with working with a team, this is just going to become more and more the norm. So in some cases, almost think of it as a favor that the schools are doing for you. So that way, if you don't have a lot of experience with it yet, this is your chance to start to dip your toe in and to start to get more comfortable with that, because this isn't going away. And I think the other tip I would give for trying to deal with nerves is also to tell yourself, like, these video essays are not new. They have been, some schools experimented with them before launching them live. Some schools have had them now for several years. And so thousands of people have done these before. You're not the first person going through this. You're not alone. If you're starting to, give your answer and you mess up a little, just keep going. It's not the end of the world. Lots of people have done this before you, and they've made it through alive and unscathed and on the other side. So, if you've ever spoken with a student at one of your target schools, like let's say through a club or through an ambassador program, they've probably had to do this too. So just sort of ask yourself, like, are they superhuman? Are they, having some sort of magical talent that I don't know? They're normal, just like you. So that may also help you get through it, to know that you're not alone. And if they could do it, you can as well.
Yeah, I have like a ninja tip as well here. I ask my applicants to do this at work, because 100% they're getting into some meeting, 100% they're giving some presentation, 100% they have to like talk to somebody or pitch something or present something and so on. So this is their opportunity to practice every time they come onto a meeting, switch on the camera, look at the camera again and make eye contact and see how it lands, and even like practice with somebody else at work every time. And that typically makes it easy for people, because they know that, hey, this is coming. And typically we do this for the interviews that come later, but video essays also, why not? Because I think that's where,
even if work is too stressful, like, just grab any friend. Like, anyone can get Zoom. It's free. You can record the meeting for free. Just do a conversation, catch up about last weekend, and see how you look and feel on camera. And you can watch it later. It'll be absolutely cringy. Like, when I work with my clients, we do interview prep. Like, we usually record the practice, the dry run of the interview, and I make them watch it, and they're like, oh my God. But that's how you can identify what you want to improve upon. So yeah. And again, about managing stress, just breathe. I think people read into this way too much. I think you're halfway prepared anyway by doing your essays, your actual written essays. And it's just about, like I said, polishing the tools in the box, and you're good to go. Like, don't be nervous, be natural. Enjoy.
I do want to share that yesterday when I was driving, there was on NPR, and I don't know which show it was. They were talking to someone about speaking, and they said that royalty and people who have a lot of power don't use their hands as much as people who don't have as much power. And they said, because people are right. Well, it's funny, because as an educator, the sort of best practice is to create movement so that people will follow you. But they were saying that it's inherent in people who are in positions of leadership. I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing that out there because I thought it was an interesting
That's
Look how
a-
much politicians speak. People who speak with authority, like thinking of Obama, you know, it's at most you'll see this kind of hand thing. It's usually this very
It is
simple
this,
gesture while they're speaking. And I don't know why this is so common. I've thought about it over the years here and there, and I was like, I guess it's sort of kind of drawing the attention of focus. Like it gives a compliment to my voice and my face, but it's not wild. So it's sort of, it's composed, it's calm, and it's sort of drawing attention to listen to my voice, look at me, and listen to me. And it's all I can come up with. Anyone else have any other ideas?
Yeah, I don't know why. That's a great question. I can tell you though, I'm thinking of the people I look up who are speakers. None of them are politicians. They're boring to watch. I'll just put it that way. I tell people, my clients, use your hands. This is what you do when you talk. Do it. Like use your hands. You do not have to be a statue. So that's a really interesting point, Vera, though. I never thought about that. Like, yeah, if you ever watch Kings or Queens or presidential speeches, it's completely different than how 99.9999% of the world speaks. So I don't think anyone should necessarily make that their model. This is my hot take, but I think we definitely need to be ourselves, as most natural ourselves, which includes using our hands.
Yeah, because I think when you think about royalty, they're by definition they want to create a distance between you and them. Because if they were on our level, then we wouldn't revere them, or the population at large wouldn't revere them in the same way. So I think it's a different exercise. We're not here to establish authority. We're here to make a human connection and to have them picture us in their classroom. Right? They're trying to get a sense of, am I going to like you? If I let you into my class and I put you on a group project with the 6 other people that I'm letting in today, are they going to like you? Or are you going to be difficult to work with? Are you going to be too shy to talk? Are you going to, whatever it might be. So I think it's fine to use your hands. Don't go crazy. Don't go overboard or cuckoo. But I think just be natural. Be the warmest version of yourself, because it's not about authority. It's about warmth and connection.
Totally. You know, and this leads up to a good point about culture. Like, first of all, cultural differences in terms of how people would approach this video essay. Like, they might be more timid or more outgoing and so forth. But on the other side, I'm thinking about how we all know schools value diversity to the nth degree. And it's an expression of your diversity by showing, like, okay, let's pick on Italians for a second, who famously talk with their hands a lot. And other cultures that have their other ways of speaking. Indians move their heads in certain ways, typically. There you go. So embrace that. Embrace your diversity. Embrace what makes you, you, and you from your culture. And that just shows how you're going to fit into that classroom and be a diverse person in the group.
Yeah.
All right. I wanted to ask another question about, like, say, editing. Like, how much would you say, guys, is acceptable? And what are the best practices for presenting a polished video essay?
So first of all, just make sure you read the instructions, because some schools actually tell you to not edit. So like MIT Sloan, I believe, says that they want it to be all in one take. So they have got 2 different video essays, right? They just introduced a spontaneous one this season, so we don't know yet what that's going to look like. But they also have for a couple of years, for several years now, they've had a pre-prepared, introduce yourself to your classmates type of video. And they've said it doesn't have to be the first take that you do. You could do 700 takes, but it has to be, what you end up submitting has to be all in one take. Right. And in the cases where you can edit, I would just say, make sure that you keep your actual voice in there. I know when these first started coming out about 10 years ago, there was a lot more leeway. It just sort of said, upload a 2-minute video introducing yourself. And so some people would just have captions or text floating across the screen with music. But again, put yourself in their shoes. What are they hoping to get from you? They're hoping to see the real you, hear your real voice on a little bit less warm and fuzzy level. They want to know, are you fluent enough in English that you'll succeed in our classroom? Do you have a nice enough personality that the other people will like you? So if you get a chance to edit it, just don't over edit such that it's not clear who you are or what you're like.
Although that would be, I know nothing about MBA application videos, but I would love to watch an MBA application video that is overly edited, like to the max. That would just sounds really entertaining to me.
I think it backfires. I've seen them.
Specifically says do not put like text on the screen. They've, I guess, received too many of those.
They've started doing that because so many people were like, ha ha ha, I'm just gonna put something together, an animation in PowerPoint with music. It's like, okay, well, you didn't
I mean,
understand these.
fair, being creative is good. I think also humor is good if it comes if you're a funny person, like, but know yourself. Like, if people tell you you're a funny person and can keep it appropriate, then go for it. Like, that's part of you. And I think humor is a mark of intelligence, if used the right way. But if not, maybe steer away from that. And in terms of being creative, I think creativity is fantastic, especially depending on the career field you're going for. If you're a person in marketing, design kind of stuff, definitely creativity is fundamental to your professional identity. However, if they've given instructions that they do not want this or that, always follow directions.
Yeah, I had to say that I'm always reminded of Elle Woods and her law video. I don't know how many of you remember from Legally Blonde.
Of course.
Yeah, I don't think we want that here.
No. In her defense, though, we really got a great sense of who Elle Woods is from that video. I mean, maybe a little bit less bikinis in the real world, but, but no one watching that video would say, like, I wonder what this person really like.
Anyone who doesn't know, Gen Y people who don't know what we're talking about, this is Legally Blonde, a hilarious movie from when? Reese Witherspoon.
And also a Broadway show.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
True.
Yeah.
FYI.
So I think there's two now, right? Isn't there like Legally Blonde 1 and Legally Blonde?
Oh, there was. Yeah. I think we just dated ourselves. Yeah.
Well,
We can edit this part of the video out.
movie. It's a great movie. Reese Witherspoon is like so spot on, and it's great. Like if you're applying to business school, it's not a prerequisite, but it's really a fun time. Well, how about we talk a little bit about what happens if someone gets a great idea, they're on camera, and they hadn't thought of it before. Do they just interrupt themselves and say, wait, I've got a better idea, I just want to say this thing? Or Maria, you were saying like run with it when you've got like 3 points. Like what happens when something comes up that they realize is actually better than the first response they had?
I think in that situation, I would look at the timer. There might be one somewhere on the screen, and sort of ask yourself, how much time do I have? If it's a few seconds in, I think it's perfectly fine to say, you know what, actually, let me remember. My favorite childhood memory is actually something different, and here's why. But also just realize that if the idea comes into your head, you still have to, for example, if there's a and why part to the question, you might come up with a better example in your head, but make sure that then you can support it with the and why part to the answer. So unless you're like positive that this new idea that just popped into your head is a real winner, I would try to stick with the original and just get through it. Because realize that oftentimes these video essays are not the final say, right? The hope or the idea is that then you will get invited perhaps to do an actual interview at a later step in the process. So it's not like this is the one chance I get to talk to them ever. There will be other opportunities. So I would just sort of resist that temptation probably, unless you know in your heart, like, oh, I'm going to knock it out of the park with this updated answer.
To your point, Maria, I think it's about balancing being focused and also being natural and not being hyper prepared, hyper focused, but also not having tunnel vision and keeping your eye on that clock, knowing how much time you have left, because it usually is there, and also on the question, so you don't deviate too much from it. For those out there who get creative and start rambling, it's like, whoa, did I answer all the question? Or
And 60 seconds is actually like not too long. When you start speaking,
you go so fast. We don't do MBA videos in our agency. We do short form videos for LinkedIn and TikTok and things like that. And you would not believe how fast it goes. You can barely get a couple words out, it seems, sometimes before it's done. So it's really got to be focused.
So Justin, can you talk to us a little bit about some of the techniques that you use to help your clients bring their core message out?
Yeah, our technique is almost like an unfair advantage. Our technique is really, it's a one-on-one conversation. And so when you're able to have a one-on-one conversation, it's live coaching. None of our clients really, very, very, very few of our clients send us footage that they pre-recorded. And so I don't know if I can speak too much to the use case for your MBA applicants here, but because we're having a live conversation with our clients, we're able to let them talk, give them coaching, maybe redo it, pause, start over. It's all live. It's all very, very, very collaborative.
Speaking in terms of that, can the applicant actually have a conversation with someone when they're recording? Can there be someone off camera that actually says the question back to them instead of it just being into the abyss? Is that allowed?
No, not that I know of.
I mean, yeah, I guess that you could get away with it. You know, I mean, I don't know how they would ever find out if you were to do that, but it almost feels like more trouble than it's worth, because then you're looking at the other person, and then what if you start to blow it and the other person, like, you start reading their facial language and you're like, oh gosh, are they approving? Are they disapproving? What does that look mean? And maybe they're just bored and thinking about what they're going to make, you know, for dinner tonight. But you I don't know. I feel like it's probably best to just practice speaking into the camera a lot beforehand, as opposed to that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's no shortcuts to video success. That's the thing. You can, I mean, it's, if you've spoken on a lot of stages, if you're comfortable speaking in public, that's maybe the fastest shortcut. But even then, often that's not a shortcut. That just comes from having done it. There is no shortcut to doing this well.
You know, one thing that we didn't talk about, and there definitely is a cultural aspect to this, smiling. You know, I think smiling is a very natural thing, a way to connect besides eye contact, like not like crazy smiling, but like, you know, just flashing a smile here and there, just being natural. Shows that you're comfortable, that you're enjoying yourself, that this is not as much of a nightmare as it might be on the inside, but we'll recognize that it's cultural, and at least most of us are American here. So for us, I think it's quite natural to smile. Now, I live in France, right? And smiling isn't necessarily viewed the same way as it is in the States. Like, let's just say that the US is the only country, I think, in the world where you're allowed to smile in your, you know, official ID. Like everywhere else, you have to keep smiling, you know? Wow. So yeah. So, you know, for some people, depending where you're from, it may feel unnatural, like you're being too casual, or you're being too friendly, or too not serious or intelligent enough, at least by perception. So especially if you're applying to American schools, I would also transmit that it's definitely welcome to smile. I think in the MBA world, in the business world, I think it's a mark of approachability. So don't hesitate.
So Eric, do some of the European schools require video essays that you know of?
Yeah, like INSEAD, yes.
INSEAD has.
So do you have to? So should people also consider that when they're applying? That like, wow, INSEAD's in France, so maybe I shouldn't smile as much. Is that something to consider?
Here's the thing. Good question, Bara. Here's the thing. The MBA is an American invention, right? And the first MBA outside of the US was in Toronto. I think it was Ivy. And the first one in Europe was INSEAD. And it was created by a Harvard professor as part of the Marshall Plan, right? Post-World War II reconstruction. So there's a lot of American DNA in INSEAD. And by extension, I think most of the European MBA programs. So, you know, it's European, but there's American in there too.
Yeah, my advice here would be that stay authentic to who you are normally. You don't have to feel too pressurized to be somebody different. So for example, if your normal resting face is smiley, then go for it. If it's something different, go for it. You don't want to kind of suddenly change things around. I would always say go for comfort, like with your clothing and how you look and anything. Go for comfort and stay comfortable, but at the same time know what's appropriate, like how you were in a real room setting where you're going for an event or something, like a business formal kind of a thing. So I mean, that would be my advice for that. Maria, you were going to say something? Yeah.
Oh, no, Eric brought up my point that INSEAD, although it is based in Europe and it is a global business school, it was based on it was founded on American programs. And so they tend to look for the same things, quote unquote, that American programs are looking for. I'm sure there are some cultural nuances, of course, as there will be, but the fundamental DNA is still pretty American. So.
Yeah. As we're nearing to the end of the episode, I had a couple questions. So Maria, do you want to share a couple war stories with us, and Justin, the same with you, about that people can take away when they're preparing for the video essays?
War stories as in things that have gone wrong, or war stories as in positives?
Yeah, you could have
or-
one of both. Maybe you were wrong and right, yeah. Or
a
whichever
really
you.
tough question and how to deal with it, or a mistake that your client learned from, and now you advise people to avoid this and that pitfalls.
I mean, I just think that we talked a lot about preparing, but the preparation is about getting comfortable with, one, looking into the camera, and two, whatever the timing is, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, getting comfortable with how short that is. I think those two things are really important. I think the worst ones I've ever seen are ones where the person is very clearly reading from a piece of paper and you can see their eyes moving back and forth as they that's actually worse. Had the person even just sort of said, hi, you know what? My mind just went blank and I'm really nervous and I'm really sorry about that. Like, that would not have been a good answer, but that would have been better than what motivates my drive for the MBA. My drive for the MBA stems from three main things. Like, that's wrong.
Maria, if you don't mind,
Oh.
just by the way, acknowledging your nervousness is not always such a bad thing to do. I mean, it's human, it's relatable, and I think by virtue of saying it helps you release it on some kind of emotional, neuro, whatever level, and then you kind of like collect your thoughts and move on. And it's like, okay, you just recovered, even if you recovered from the internal.
Right. So just, again, keeping in mind that the person on the other side is looking for reasons to admit you. They're looking to build a dynamic, diverse class, diverse not only in terms of ethnicity and gender and backgrounds, but also in terms of personalities. So if you're an introvert, don't worry about, oh gosh, am I an introvert? Am I doomed in this process? Like, introverts make some of the best leaders. So just be yourself, but the authentic version. And if the authentic version of you would say, oh, you know what? Wait, what was I going to say? Oh, right. That's fine. Because in real life, you would do that. And it does make you more relatable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anyone watched the roll call of the DNC, but it was very long and it was amazing. I mean, I really enjoyed it.
I'm still waiting for Beyonce.
Lil Jon.
Right. I mean, but one of the takeaways that I had that I think all of you applicants can remember is that there were so many mistakes. There were so many like mishaps and so many things that didn't flow smoothly with household name folks. Like, they were just like, whoops, I'm messing up right now. Right. So people make mistakes even on like a highly produced event, like roll call at the DNC. So you're not unique. And Maria, you said this before also. I'm just reiterating, like, this happens in real life, that things are not always perfect. So you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be authentic.
Yeah. My war story, so to speak. I mean, all of our videos, we don't do MBA application videos. Where, I'm here for some more of the technical side of things for today's discussion. But the closest thing I can think of to kind of draw a parallel here is that if you are a leader and you're getting into video now, this is a point I made earlier and I'll make it again. You are giving yourself such an incredible advantage, because I cannot tell you how many leaders I interviewed the #1 broker in the United States for a year as one of our clients. He could not get this down. He just could not get this down. And it wasn't, it just didn't have the right skills, but it was also just was always in fight or flight mode, just didn't really understand I'm okay, even with our coaching. So like, you would think there were leaders out there who would be better on video who just aren't. And it's I'm not criticizing this gentleman, not by any means, but imagine the amount of impact you're going to have as a leader if you're okay being not okay, going into situations and then learning to keep doing that. I mean, are we even talking about video anymore, right? This is the idea that this brings up a core fear in us. And as a leader, you're going to have to embrace that core fear in a variety of contexts, in a variety of ways, and be okay with embracing it and messing up and going forward anyways.
Great way to end it up today. Thanks, Justin.
Well, I think that we have really covered this topic comprehensively. It's been super interesting and I think insightful for me and also for all of our viewers. So thank you so much to our guests, Justin and Maria. It's great to see you both. And thank you for all that you contributed. And also guests in our audience and to my co-hosts. If you liked this episode, don't forget to give us a little thumbs up and subscribe to MBA Waves. And we're going to be continuing to give you the top information on how to apply to business school, how to be your best self, how to test great, and what to do to get there. So don't forget to check us out next week. We'll be same time, same station. We look forward to seeing you again. And for all past episodes, you can also go to our website, mbawaves.com. And everyone have a great week. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.